Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it's the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the M.O.A. broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks. As always, we have a phenomenal show lined up for you today. All kinds of good information. We're going to get right into it. Let's jump into our intro. What do we have here? This is Season 2, Episode 9 of the Make It Out Alive broadcast. Show highlights for today. We've got some good stuff. A real-life Rambo Rampage ends in gunfire. Were you fooled by the FBI files? Remember that show from the, late 90s, early 2000s? The FBI files. Were you fooled? We'll get into that momentarily. A rampaging grizzly snacks on a hiker and a Taco Bell shootout in the great state of, you guessed it, Florida. The Sunshine State just keeps on giving. So we've got all of that and more. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into the show, I want to get one brief thing. And then we'll move on. We're not going to do any more about First Amendment auditors. We've covered that a number of times. And that always gets the weird thing on that, and then I'm going to keep moving, is the response that I get via emails and messages and so forth. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, feel free to hit us up. info@gearconvoy.com. That's info@gearconvoy.com. That's also our website, gearconvoy.com, if you want to check that out. And if not, that's absolutely fine too. But the feedback we get on these First Amendment auditors is almost always split right down the middle. There are those that just rabidly hate them and just want to punch them all in the nose, which I understand. And then there are those that are a big fan of the work that some of them do in quote unquote championing the First Amendment and the right to freedom of speech and so forth. So anyway, just an interesting thing how evenly it gets split. Most issues are kind of lopsided one way or the other, but that seems to split the listening audience, at least of this show, right down about the middle. Anyway, that being said, let's get, where are we at? Oh, the hate mail that I got for like 2 weeks in a row over the female driver jokes / observations. I don't really care. You can think whatever you want. You can believe whatever you want. That is the beauty of freedom and liberty. I've made my thoughts, pretty clear, I think, on the whole thing, but, whatever. No bad intentions. We're all very lighthearted here, but I still believe that. That being said, I came across a video on social media the other day, and I have to do a little bit more research to make sure this wasn't fake. I don't think it was. It looked like it was real, and I saw a couple of different explanations for it that all made sense, but they're in a parking lot somewhere. Somebody's filming this with their phone in a parking lot somewhere of like a strip mall or a fast food joint or something, and there is this big jacked up Chevy pickup truck that has literally driven up onto and is stuck on, like Bigfoot style, on a Lamborghini Huracan. And I don't know if they caught the footage of the person actually driving it up onto this Lamborghini or not, but it looks almost like a small-scale version of a Bigfoot show. If you remember that from, I don't know, the 80s and 90s, maybe there's Bigfoot still around, the big blue monster truck. Yeah, they just drove this big jacked up pickup truck right on top of a Lamborghini. And guess what, folks? The driver, according to all reports, was, wait for it, a female. No, I don't know. I guess it could have happened to anyone if you're a bad driver. But it looks like they were getting things worked out. Obviously the driver of the Lamborghini wasn't too thrilled, but it looked like it wasn't getting out of control. So I guess they'll let insurance handle it, or somebody's going to be cutting somebody a check. But I'll do more research on that and report back. Well, okay, pardon me. I needed a quick sip there. All right, I don't know about where you were at, but up here at 4,200 feet in the hills of southern Oregon, we are already mowing the lawn. In fact, I should have been mowing the lawn about a month. Yeah, probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, but I finally got to it last week. I had parts of the lawn that were nearly, and this is not an exaggeration, it was just below knee high, and I'm right at 6 foot tall on a good day. And yeah, so just patches were getting out of control, and I had to go in there and mow it twice, go in there, and we've been getting rain, so I kept putting it off, and then finally by the time it was dry enough that I could do it, when I had the time and everything else in the daylight, it was just, I had to mow it twice, hold the mower like halfway up in the air as I pushed through it to just chop down the top of the weed tops, and then go back and mow it up again and then rake it, because I got to get the stinking blade on this lawnmower is dull. I haven't sharpened it in probably, 2 years, and I need to get a mulching blade. It's just a standard blade. And it just puts out these huge, gigantic clippings that die, and then they, kill the big portions of the lawn, because even though I've got a small lawn, it just kills the grass there because it blocks the sunlight. And we get moisture here, precipitation, very sporadically, because we're technically in the high desert of southern Oregon. So anyway, blah, 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 just rambling on, but glad to get that done. It smelled so good. And probably one of my favorite things about summertime, especially when you mow your own lawn, there are a few things. It was actually pretty hot, or relatively speaking, for the time of year last Sunday whenever I did it. Got it a little earlier in the afternoon. So it was about, I think it was 74, 76 degrees. Now, we've been in the 50s for days prior to that, so that felt pretty warm, and the sun was very bright and intense. Afterwards, the smell of that grass, after I raked it all up, did the weed eating and everything else, watered the lawn, and then the smell of that grass, and then the refreshing feeling, that good feeling of satisfaction when you've done the lawn. It's one of those few tasks that, it actually gives you an immediate visual reward. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things. You fix some little thing around the house. If you own a home, even if you're in an apartment, whatever, it doesn't matter. There's an endless list of things that need to be done on a constant basis. No matter how many things you strike off that list, it's like for every one you strike down, 2 more rise to take its place. But most of them go unsung. No one notices. No one cares. When you mow the lawn, you look good to yourself. You look good to your neighbors. It smells good, and you get to sit back and enjoy that feeling, that reward of all your hard work. And one of the few things that just sets it off, an ice cold beer afterward is great, but what even pushes it over the top a little further, in my opinion, is a delicious ice cold mint julep. Now, that may not be up your alley. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of mixed drinks. If you're not familiar, mint julep is a drink. It's a bourbon or whiskey-based drink. I'm not a big fan of mixed drinks. I typically just prefer straight bourbon. That's the majority of what I drink whenever I have an alcoholic beverage. I don't believe in getting drunk. That's not my thing. You do you. But I do enjoy, a drink occasionally, especially at the end of the day. And post lawn mowing, right after you're done mowing the lawn, one of the things are as refreshing. If I can get this out of my mouth here, holy smokes, is a good mint julep. Now, if you never had one, mint julep is a very simple drink. What you do is you take a glass of crushed ice, and it needs to be crushed. Well, it's important that it be crushed ice. We'll get to that momentarily. But you're going to go ahead and put in about 2 teaspoons of sugar, just plain white sugar. And then you're going to put in, I don't know, the next part varies a little bit, but I usually put about 8 to 10 mint leaves in there. Now, if you're going to do this, you want to make sure you get spearmint leaves, because peppermint and some of the other mint leaves, they have a little bit more bitter to them, and in my opinion, they do not taste nearly as good. Spearmint has a certain sweetness to it that is very good, and it just complements the rest of the ingredients in the drink very, very nicely, and it's delicious. So you want to go ahead and toss in about 8 or 10 mint leaves, and then you're going to gently bruise those. They make a mashing tool for the bar. I just use a wooden spoon. You're not trying to tear them up, but you'll see as you press on them, they begin to bruise, and that's exactly what you want. What you're doing is you're releasing the oils and the flavor from those mint leaves, and it's going to combine with that sugar, and then you're going to go ahead and pour in a jigger with that's usually 2 ounces. So basically 2 fluid ounces, or a little bit more, whatever you prefer to suit your taste, of bourbon whiskey. Okay, I prefer a deep smoky bourbon. You do whatever you want. It's kind of hard to go wrong. You could even use some of the lower grade mixing bourbons for this, and it would still be good, because then you're going to mix that all up, let the sugar dissolve, and get all the mint flavor and the bourbon kind of all combined. And then you're going to top it off to fill it with crushed ice. Now, the reason you want to use crushed ice, you're going to use like a highball glass or something like that. They even make mint julep glasses specifically for that drink. You probably want like an 8 to 12 ounce size glass. So like a full large beverage glass may be a bit much, but I'll be honest, I do them frequently in a mason jar. One of those mason jars you drink out of, and it tastes just fine there. But the reason you want crushed ice, if you use full cubed ice or like the big round ice balls cubes, then it's not going to melt properly. And you want the crushed ice so that it melts rapidly up to a point, and that helps to dilute the drink down to the right amount of dilution so that everything all kind of mixes and tastes just right. Especially if you're out in the hot sun, that ice is going to start melting quickly, and that's going to get it kind of diluted down to the flavor that you want, that concentration. Now, if you're using just plain white sugar, you want to make sure that you let it, dissolve really good before you add the whiskey and the ice, or else you won't be able to stir it properly. You can also use simple syrup. That's going to make things a lot easier. If you don't know what simple syrup is, it's simply a product you can get at the store, any of your grocery stores or a liquor store. It's basically just a mixture, a concentrated mixture of sugar and water. That's all it is. You can make your own simple syrup at home. You simply add equal parts of white sugar and water. It typically helps to use like hot water, or you can use cold water and then warm it up on the stove. That will simply speed the dissolution of the sugar. It's not that big of a deal to do. It's very easy. What I prefer, though, simple syrup will make it much, much easier for this to blend all together, though, because the sugar has already been melted in the solution, and it will save you a lot of time, because sugar in an ice cold liquid tends to dissolve pretty slowly. Now, what I like to do is make a simple syrup with like raw or turbinado sugar. I love the raw sugar. It's a browner sugar. I don't know exactly how far away it is from being brown sugar. It's definitely a different product. I understand the difference, but it's on its way to being like a brown sugar. Only it's obviously different. So it's got a little darker flavor to it, a little darker taste, a little deeper taste, and it really, in my opinion, complements the bourbon in that drink very, very well. So that's what I do. I put 8 to 10 mint leaves in there, about a tablespoon or so of the raw simple syrup, and then you mix all that together. Then you put in your 2 ounces or so, give or take, maybe a little extra splash if you want some more kick. And then you're going to go ahead and pack it with ice and stir that all up good. Let it melt a little bit. Give yourself a minute or two in the sun, and then start drinking it. It is extremely refreshing. It goes down very smooth. There's a lot of sugar, so you're probably not going to want to have too many of those, and you got to watch out, because those things, the mint julep is so refreshing that it's very easy for it to sneak up on you. You got to watch out. If you ever watch any highlights of the Kentucky Derby, the mint julep is the official drink of the Kentucky Derby, and using Kentucky bourbon, and you can see some people get pretty plastered with those things, so be careful. But they are delicious, very refreshing, minty, sweet, and a little bit of bourbon undertones. So absolutely delicious. Give it a try. Let me know if you like it. Send that info and feedback to info@gearconvoy.com. We'd love to hear what you think of the mint julep. And let me know if you try it with the white or the raw or turbinado sugar. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And let me know what you think, what you prefer if you go through the trouble of giving that a try. As far as getting mint leaves, the easiest way to do it, if you're going to drink a number of these or drink it regularly throughout the summer, is just go to a good grocery store or an outdoor place, like a home improvement place, and buy a couple of spearmint plants. They're very easy to take care of. They're very hardy. Basically, all you're going to need is a little bit of plant food and water, and don't plant them in your garden with everything else, because they will take over. You want to put them in a separate pot. But anyway, enough on that. We got tons of stuff to move here, so let's go. The other day, before I get into the first story we have here, I had a couple of hours to kill the other day while waiting for something, and so I watched a couple of episodes of that TV show from the late 90s, early 2000s, The FBI Files. You remember the show. This is the one that had that guy, that had the great narrator. He had a great voice, and it had all the, the inside track on the latest FBI technology. They covered bank robbers and serial killers and snipers and all that kind of stuff. It was a great show. A lot of good memories watching this show. I enjoyed it. It still holds up pretty well today. Obviously, a lot of things are dated because DNA was just starting to emerge in some ways for law enforcement application then. But, it's still a good show. Now, what was I talking to, pointing to earlier, or alluding to earlier when I said, were you fooled by the FBI files? I got to be honest, it's long been my belief that the FBI files was a prop piece, a propaganda piece for the FBI. Why would I say that? It was a good show. But you could tell they clearly had a lot of FBI cooperation on this program. They were constantly interviewing FBI agents. They were going into, in-depth explanations and videos of some of their practices, how they, checked for rifling, how they looked at ballistics, how they did DNA examination and so forth. Extensive interviews. It's a lot of cooperation and time. Why would the FBI want to do that? Well, of course, they want to look good. That whole show was basically a recruiting video and a PR piece, in my opinion. And I don't think it's a bad thing for the FBI. But why do you think they would have done that, folks? The FBI files came out in, I believe, 98, 99. I did the research to see when it started a couple of days ago. It was 98 or 99, I think. What would have possibly happened in the early to mid-90s that would have made the FBI look so bad they needed a propaganda piece to get back in the public's good graces? Oh, I don't know, maybe Ruby Ridge followed by Waco. And neither of those are funny events. I'm doing a special show here in a couple of weeks, not about either of those, but about a different organization and a different historical incident involving the FBI, and they really made some changes. Ruby Ridge and Waco. For those of you not familiar, I'm going to keep this very brief because where are we doing on time here? Oh man, I've already blown. I've blown way past my time. Anyways, Ruby Ridge and Waco were two events where there were standoffs with the FBI, and both involved the loss of life of American citizens on a large enough scale by American law enforcement that it deeply disturbed, as it should have, in my opinion, a lot of people, both in the United States and around the world, that observed this. And the FBI came under a tremendous amount of scrutiny to the point where there were congressional hearings. There were there was a lot of bad press and PR for the FBI. And whether or not, how do we put this without taking a side and getting in the middle? We don't have time for that. The bottom line is whether or not either side, the Ruby Ridge, Randy Weaver and his family, and the folks there at Waco, we'll leave it at that, the folks at Waco, mistakes were made and not everybody was doing what they should have been doing, but things could have been handled much, much better. Ruby Ridge, do some research. We're going to cover both of those incidents in later episodes, but the FBI was looking real bad, and then along come the FBI files that really made them, portrayed them in a very, very positive light. They were the heroes. They were always catching the bad guy, and, it discussed heavily their successes and very, very rarely their failures. And it really helped in my opinion, helped to rehabilitate the public's image of the FBI because they had made some very, very serious mistakes, in my opinion, and apparently in their own, because there was a lot of soul searching by the FBI, at least on the public face of it all. After what happened at Ruby Ridge and Waco, some bad things happened. At Ruby Ridge, it's hard to even get into it, but, briefly, if you don't know, Randy Weaver was the guy there, and it's too long of a story to get into now, but his son was killed. His wife was also shot and killed while she was holding their baby. And the whole thing, in a lot of people's, I don't get into it. I don't have time. We got to get moving. But it was just a very, very bad, very, very public bloodshed there with the FBI involved. And the same thing at Waco. It was just brutal watching the footage. Children died in fire there at Waco, along with other. It was a mess. So anyway, I wasn't trying to portray the FBI files in a bad light. It just, in my opinion, it kind of had the feel of a prop piece to me. And, it definitely worked because you can't watch that show and come away without being like, wow, the FBI really stepped in and saved the day. And they did in a lot of cases. I'm not here to knock on the FBI, although things have, we could go into a whole other episode of that right now in just the last couple of years. But I also remember one of my favorite parts was the beginning. They had, excuse me, hang on. They always had the intro, and they had that guy come out. Hi, I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. And I love that dude's intro. Former head of the FBI's New York office. We're here to help law enforcement. But that dude was the intro to the show, and I think, unfortunately, he passed a couple of years ago. Don't know what he was like in real life, but I always enjoyed his intro to that show. So Anyway, that's enough. We got to get moving on. Speaking of law enforcement, we go to Tennessee. Special Forces vet accused of trying to kill wife is found dead, ending a massive Tennessee manhunt. Craig Berry, a retired U.S. Army Special Forces veteran from Stewart County, Tennessee, was accused of shooting his wife during a domestic dispute in the early morning hours of May 1, 2026. According to investigators, Berry's wife called 911 after being shot while trying to flee the couple's home near Dover, Tennessee. Authorities later said she suffered life-threatening injuries but survived and was eventually released from the hospital. So after the shooting, the alleged shooting, whatever, Berry allegedly fled into the heavily wooded terrain near his home, on the Tennessee-Kentucky border before the cops showed up. Now, of course, the media gets a whiff of this and immediately goes high profile because of Berry's military background. Apparently, he was described as a retired Special Forces veteran with extensive survival and evasion training, was physically fit, very familiar with the terrain, an excellent swimmer and diver, and likely armed with at least one handgun and extra ammunition. So the whole thing developed very, very quickly. Fortunately, the wife survived, though. As of the writing of this article, the wife survived. She's going to be okay. They treated the situation, law enforcement, like a fugitive survival operation. They brought in everybody and their brother. The Stewart County Sheriff's Office, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, Tennessee Highway Patrol, U.S. Marshals Service, K-9 teams, drones, helicopters, and tracking teams all joined the search for this rogue Rambo soldier, as the media tried to portray it. He was captured on trail cam, showing a blurry image believed to be Berry moving through the woods in camouflage clothing at night. Authorities had warned residents to lock their doors and stay inside, report suspicious activity. The whole thing was quite a big deal. And it lasted for a couple of days until, let's see, what happened. Okay, so Berry himself, we'll get to how the resolution in just a minute, but he served in the Army apparently from 1992 to 2016 as an infantryman and a Special Forces medical sergeant, deployed to Iraq multiple times before he finally retired as a sergeant first class. So during the search, the investigators believed he may have destroyed his phone and was possibly receiving outside assistance, as these fugitives sometimes do, although officials later said they found no evidence that anyone actually helped him evade capture. So they speculated about the cause of the fight between him and his wife. Whatever, that's not really important for this. The manhunt ended, however, on May 6th when Berry was found dead in a wooded area near Dover, reportedly not far from his last known location. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Allegedly, there were different reports on where he shot himself, allegedly, and so forth. Whatever. But that officially ended the multi-day search operation and closed it down. Now, the media, of course, ran with this because anytime somebody has survival training, especially if they're military and or special forces, they love to make the comparisons to Rambo, right? First Blood, again, if you're not familiar with that, that was the first Rambo film. It was based on a book entitled First Blood. And hold on one second here. Excuse me. We've had a couple of controlled burns up here, and the smoke has just been rampant. And so just really my throat has taken a beating the last couple of days. Anyway, the movie First Blood and the book First Blood were very, very different. In the movie, Stallone plays the hero, and there's a lot of controversy or history, I should say. The movie that you saw in the theaters or on TV or whatever as far as First Blood was very different from the movie that was filmed. There was a ton. Apparently, it was so bad, according to multiple interviews that I've seen, and I've researched this quite a bit because the movie featured a hollow-handled knife. I also design and make hollow-handled survival knives, so, that's a whole other story. But apparently, there was a lot of history there, and there were big parts of the movie that were cut out because Stallone hated the movie so bad he wanted to buy it back and basically burn it. They tried to combine just this bizarre amount of humor and action and pontificating by the Rambo character and so forth. It was very, very weird. In the original cut, Rambo basically commits suicide. He kills himself. That was a whole other thing, which of course ended the possibility of sequels and whatever else. That didn't go very well at all, so they basically trimmed all the fat they could possibly trim on this movie, and then they filmed another ending because audiences hated the ending where Rambo died, and Rambo got to live. Okay, so if you don't know, that's very, very different than the book. In the movie, I think maybe one or two people die almost incidentally to other events. There's the one sheriff that does fall. He falls out of the helicopter and he dies. But Rambo, I think he may kill one or two other people almost incidentally. There's a car crash, I think, where the car flips over at some point. I don't know if those people actually die or not. They don't show it explicitly. But Rambo is much more magnanimous in the movie. In the book, he flips out completely. He loses his mind and he goes on a killing spree rampage. He kills anybody and everybody that gets in his way. And has a good time doing it. And it comes down to a standoff between him and the sheriff. And I mean, everybody basically dies. It was just a bloody mess in the book. He was a much less likable character as far as having, hero characteristics and so forth. But anyway, there you go. That's the difference between the movie and the book. And of course, the media just loves to run with headlines and have a good time with that. All right. Now, one of the other things that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, or about a month or two ago, I don't know, a couple episodes back, was the HIT training, high intensity training, HIT. Now, this is probably one of the most controversial things, if you want to use the word controversial, in the world of physical fitness as far as weightlifting and so forth and bodybuilding. I discussed it kind of briefly or a little bit more in depth, I guess, in two different episodes. Basically, what HIT is, HIT training, which doesn't need to be said that way, HIT, because high intensity training, but whatever, it's just called HIT or HIT training. This was developed and really pushed, I shouldn't say developed, it was really pushed and kind of really rose to the forefront in the 70s and early 80s. Probably the biggest, most well-known bodybuilder at that time that was really pushing it was a bodybuilder named Mike Mentzer. Now, Mentzer was a great bodybuilder. He was a very intelligent guy. Sadly, he had kind of a rough end to his life from everything that I've read and spoken with people and talked about and learned and so forth. But there was a time he was very intelligent, and he was also a very good bodybuilder. And he had learned the HIT, the HIT, goes all the way back. The HIT training goes all the way back to even before Mentzer, and that takes us back to Nautilus equipment and so forth. But that's a whole other story that we're not going to have time to get into today. Mentzer wrote a couple of books about this. There was it was Heavy Duty, was what he called his training system, and then he had the second book, which was Heavy Duty 2, and that's basically he refined it and made a few changes and took it kind of to the next level, if you will. Now, in my opinion, I've read Heavy Duty 1 and 2. It really is not that complex. If you read the books, which I wouldn't say I recommend or don't recommend it, I don't really care. It wasn't that great of a book as far as all the stuff because he really had about probably 2 or 3 chapters could have explained everything you really needed to know as far as how the training worked. And then there were just a bunch of chapters and a lot of pontificating on Mentzer's part, and he tries to bring in various types of philosophy and other medical stuff and so forth. Some of it was interesting, some of it I wasn't really interested in at all, and it just felt kind of like fluff to fill the book, to make it seem, as long as it needed to be. And I get that sometimes you got to fill enough pages to actually make the book, a certain number of pages or whatever to get a certain classification and so forth. Anyways, the bottom line is this. If you're interested in HIT and the HIT training, it's very simple. All you really have to do is do a handful of exercises, one set to absolute failure, give yourself plenty of time to recover. Diet is not really extremely important unless you're competing. As long as you're eating a reasonably clean and well-balanced diet. Diet is really not that big of a deal for the average person. Now, if you have certain specific fitness goals or other types of physique goals, then yes, diet will help you take things to the next level. But if your goal is to get in pretty good shape, to be as strong as you reasonably need to be, and in as good a physical condition as you reasonably want and can be, then diet, all you really need to do is eat a good, well-balanced diet. Now, some people are going to thrive better with more carbs or less carbs, more protein, less protein. You do you. I have found for myself personally, I tend to do much better in life overall with a higher protein diet as far as, I don't really do the carnivore thing, but I don't eat a lot of carbs. I feel really good when I eat mostly proteins. And obviously I have some carbs and I really like rice as well occasionally and so forth. But different people have different things. But a good balanced diet, honestly, is about the best advice I can give you. That being said, if you're eating reasonably clean and you're controlling your caloric intake and not going way beyond your maintenance level or your growth level or whatever it is you're trying to go for, diet is not insanely critical for the average person. Like I said, if you're eating good and clean, it really isn't that big of a deal. Good home-cooked meals are about the best thing you can do. Again, if you got specific goals and so forth, you're going to dial that diet in and, possibly supplementation and so forth, especially if you're going beyond just the average person. The main thing, though, is good, clean workouts, one set to failure, and then give yourself plenty of time to recover. What does that mean? In general, the average person, especially once you get past the initial phase where you've really had that explosive burst of growth and strength, is you're going to need to give yourself 2 to 3 days or even 4 days in between workouts if you do all of your exercises to failure. And I'm not going to argue this with people. I've done this for decades. I've trained a number of people over the years in the double digits, probably not the triple digits. I may have rounded the triple digit base, but not in the triple digits, not hundreds of people. Okay, but I've trained a bunch and I've read and done this enough to know this works consistently if you put in the work. Now, obviously, consult your doctor before you begin any exercise program and whatever. Make sure what you're doing is safe. But it's very simple to do this. What HIT really focused on, as should most general workout regimes and programs, okay, is large compound movements, things like squat. I'm not a big fan of bench press. I don't think bench press is a very good exercise at all. I haven't done bench press in probably since I was in high school. Did it there because that was part of weightlifting class, and then I quickly didn't. I stopped doing bench presses. I've always felt it was a poor exercise in a number of ways. I'm not saying it was worthless, but I think it was a poor exercise in a number of ways. It puts a lot of stress on the pectorals. You see a lot of blown pecs on people benching. And those are discussions you could have all day long. We're not going to get into all that today. I'm just simply saying you do see a lot of people when you start getting heavier with the bench press. It definitely has issues with shoulder. I know a lot of people, and this would be in the double digits at least, personally, of people that have destroyed their shoulders and other body parts from doing bench presses incorrectly or correctly over the years. I much, much prefer weighted dips. They're a phenomenal exercise for the whole upper body, but that's another story. We'll get into that another time. But you want to take those compound movements, things like squats, dips, deadlift, overhead press, barbell curl. That straight barbell curl, it's going to give you a much better workout than the easy curl bar, which is, that again is another show and subject all to itself. Straight bar, barbell curls, and then your triceps exercise of choice and so forth. Basically, once you get warmed up, when I do squats or whenever I did squats, I don't work out as much as I should right now, but whenever I did squats, I would do 1 to 2, even 3 warm-up sets of 3 or 4 reps each until I got kind of warmed up and I could feel that I was loose and I was ready to handle my working weight. And then I would do usually sets of 20 with the squat. And you can say what you want about, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. When you can do a set of 20 squats with 225, I'm going to tell you right now, if you can do 20 reps of 225, then you are in pretty doggone good shape. That's going to take you between 2.5 and 3 minutes in general, unless you just blast them out. That means you are going all out, moving over 400 pounds probably if you're over a body weight of 200 pounds or more. Between that and the squat weight, you're moving 400-something pounds, a vertical distance of probably 1.5 to 2.5 feet, depending how tall you are, nonstop for 2.5 minutes. That is fantastic anaerobic and aerobic workout right there. So anyways, I don't have time to get into all this and keep going, but that was one of the things that we want to discuss was the Mentzer. Now, Mentzer's probably his best student was Dorian Yates. And Dorian Yates went on to become a multiple Mr. Olympia winner, and he did the same thing of basically 1 set to failure. Now, he did a couple of warm-up sets and did this and that and the other. Some of the stuff is debatable depending how much of a purist you want to be on the 1 set to failure thing, but the main thing was doing a clean set to clean, safe failure. Failure doesn't mean whenever you're sitting there, pushing yourself to the point where you're breaking, bones and blowing tendons and so forth. Failure simply means you can't do another clean repetition in good form. Some people will say a little cheating is allowed. Some will say it isn't. That's up to you. But it really boils down to doing clean repetitions to failure until you can't do another rep in good form. That's really all there is to it. Now, it's much more difficult in practice because it hurts. The more you do it, the better you learn how to do it and push yourself, the harder it burns and the more it hurts. But again, that's another story. We don't have time to get into that. I wanted to get into the 80 Olympia. Where are we at on time here? Okay, I got to get moving. I'm not going to have enough time to get into that. The 80 Olympia, we're going to do it anyway. I don't care. Let's go. Let's shoot it all. The 80 Olympia was a big showdown between Mike Mentzer and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'll do this more in depth in another episode because I'm not going to have time to do it justice right now. But basically, the whole thing was a gigantic mess. And like I said, I'm not going to get too in depth at the moment. I'm going to gloss over it with some broad strokes here because I don't have time. But basically, Mentzer was probably at his best in 1980 or very, very close to it. Arnold had been out for a couple of years, I believe. He wasn't even supposed to be on the 80 Olympia. And he came in at the last minute. They had, I think what it boiled down to was they were going to do a movie that year or the following, and they wanted to be able to promote Arnold, get him back in the public eye, and, be able to tout him as the current Mr. Olympia or something like that. Okay, Arnold was also tied in very closely with, this is just my opinion, but we do know that Arnold was been very closely with the Weeders, and they had a lot of sway. They were big names in bodybuilding, and so forth. If you don't know who they are, Joe and Ben, I believe, Weeder. You can look that up. We'll do an episode on it at a later time because it's really a fascinating subject. Anyways, whatever you want to say about it, the bottom line is Arnold, I don't think even technically qualified in some ways to compete in that 1980 Mr. Olympia contest. But because he was Arnold and he was friends and in good with all these other people, he was kind of let in. He did his, his enrollment and whatever. He showed up at the last minute. He was nowhere near his best shape. That part is pretty much universally agreed on by everybody that I've seen discuss this subject. And if you look at it, he does not look anywhere near his best. He's still Arnold, okay? He was in amazing shape, but he was not at his best, which is the point of the whole Mr. Olympia contest. And long story short, he won. And it was a very controversial win. A lot of people thought that he didn't look like he was anywhere near his best, and a lot of people thought other people should have won, including, Mike Mentzer. Some people believe should have won. Now, whether or not he should have won it or not is really immaterial. The bottom line was it really dealt Mentzer a blow because he was in probably his best shape, and whether he won or not, I think, in his opinion, and mine too, Arnold shouldn't have won that year. He was not the real true winner in that show. It really made people think. It shook a lot of people. And it made a lot of people think that it was very political and that it was decided in backrooms meetings and so forth, as opposed to being decided on the stage, which is where they believed it should have been, decided by the judges and who had the best physique and so forth. Now, how much of that is true and so forth, we can't really prove. It's very difficult. And we're talking about something that happened, 45, 46 years ago. It is what it is. But the net effect of that was the last, I believe it was the last pro show that Mentzer did, or at least the last Olympia, because he was just so disgusted, I believe, with the whole thing. And so really kind of a loaded situation, kind of a shame. Mentzer did go on to do training, and he wrote his books and so forth. But again, he was a very intelligent dude in his time. But that he didn't really start the whole one set to failure and other things. That goes back even further, and we'll probably cover that in a different show. Not trying to take anything away from Mentzer, but that's commonly attributed to him. He got it from someone else when he started training. He built a lot of his mass and his physique, I believe, with higher volume training, which was kind of the standard at the time because that was the Arnold way, and that was the way a lot of guys did it. So anyway, all right, where are we at on time here? You know what? We're going to go ahead and skip to our final story because we don't have time for the others. We'll get to those next week and get those covered because we have some good stuff there. Okay, let me get a quick sip before we jump in. Okay, let's see. Where are we at? We'll do the bear story then. All right. It's time for the M.O.A. Chaos Report, where somebody's bad decisions give you a good laugh. Real news, real hard, real funny. Some elements modified for extra laughs. All right, folks, we go again to the great state of Florida. This story comes to us via the New York Post. Florida Taco Bell worker fires gun at 3 female customers after one tried to fill water cup with soda, according to the police. The article tells us Taco Bell has gone loco. Anybody see Richie? An employee at the fast food chain in Florida allegedly shot at 3 women who tried to snag free soda from the establishment.
Look, I had to get it on, man. He was making a move. I had to get it on.
Damari Jaquan Patterson, if I'm pronouncing that right, pardon me, Damari Jaquan, if I am not, aged 20, was arrested Monday and accused of snapping at the trio while he was on the clock at a Taco Bell in West Palm Beach. Police said the 3 women entered the Mexican-inspired eatery together and each asked for a cup of water. One of them then pivoted to the soda fountain and started filling her cup to snag some free sody pop. Patterson, who witnessed the trick, started shouting as startled bystanders recorded the ensuing chaos. "Put that soda down before I shoot you. I'm gonna bust a cap in yo." One video obtained by police showed Patterson berating the woman who lingered near the soda fountain. CBS 12 reported police said they could hear a firearm being racked in the video mere seconds before the first round went off. One woman was hit by a bullet and collapsed to the ground. Another suffered a graze wound, while the third bolted, the outlet reported. Patterson, who tried to plead self-defense, allegedly chased her down and fired another shot in her direction, which struck a window near the Taco Bell entrance. "You better stop before I blast another cap in yo." Panicked diners inside still scrambled out the exit, while others took cover underneath the table, with some confused whether they had actually heard gunfire or not. According to news reports, diners had already begun shrugging off the shooting and accepted the chaos as part of a shifting societal norm at Taco Bell. I mean, it doesn't surprise me in the world we live in today, one customer said. Another added, "It's not a problem. Things happen, and we just take it as it is and go from there." 2 of the victims were treated for minor injury at a local hospital and are expected to make a full recovery. The third, who Patterson allegedly tried to chase down, didn't sustain any injuries. Patterson was charged with 3 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm. All right, folks, that's going to do it. Remember, don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare for it. If you wait, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.